at Morialta Conservation Park. It's a natural environment where we have a introduced species, a rabbit. It's a reminder that introduced species can be incredibly devastating to the food web. They compete with native animals for food, for habitats. Invariably, they've got very quick production rates where they have high litters and they reproduce very quickly, which puts greater strain on our native animals trying to compete with all of the invasive species for that space. In the car park, this is a good example of filtering. You can see that there's no signposting for the climbing area. So you actually need to know that this is a park designated for a climbing area. There's no information about climbing, so we're actually trying to screen the public for people that actually know about the climbing area to actually avoid people that are non-climbers visiting the area. You can see the car park is being created and the vegetation has been devastated. You can see that there's no vegetation. You can see exposed roots that puts the trees in vulnerable situations because that's the life form of the tree, trying to gain nutrients from the surrounding area. They've concreted the area, so it's putting greater strain on the root structure of the tree. You can see an olive tree here, which is another example of introduced species, once again brought over from our European heritage. They provide very little habitat for animals. They compete with natural species. They compete with sun, water, nutrients, and they provide very little habitats and homes for our native animals. You can see that there was a farm area, and you can see bare paddocks that have been planted with crops that have been cut down, and then you can see after the fence line that it turns into a natural environment, but there's evidence still of farming crops on the other side of the fence line. One of the problems with our hippo regiment is overpopulation. Because our population increases, we need to overharvest, we need to create more areas where we need to destroy vegetation to actually create food sources for our population. Have a look at the gate structure, which we're trying to channel all of the climbers into one area. The gate structure is to try to avoid anyone or any animal getting from the roadway into the farmland and into the Morialta Conservation Park. There is some signage, which is another management tool, which is to restrict, to actually tell the public what the rules are and what they can and cannot do. But you can also notice that there is very little in way of signage. It's not encouraging people to come into the area. It's definitely not highlighting that it's a climbing area. So once again, filtering the population coming into the area. The pathway definitely channels all of the population to a particular area. It's sacrificing that area to eliminate other destruction to the biodiversity of the area. The pathways, you can see a clear of vegetation from either side. We come up to a cleaning station, which is for phytophthora, which is a cinnamon fungus, which is one of 100 most dangerous invading species. It affects the root structure of plants, and it's trying to minimize the spread of this fungus into the biodiversity within the area. You can see the clear examples of biodiversity now where there's multiple levels of species, different heights. It actually is trying to provide canopies and understories to allow animals to move without fear of being killed or being hunted by their consumers that sit above on another trophic level. The pathway's centralised impact, hardened surfaces, which you can see from scratching the dirt, little to no vegetation. It also increases the water runoff, which actually increases erosion. And you can notice that when rain comes along, the surfaces become very wet. Here's an example of a management technique called brushing. Sometimes when there's a hairpin on a track, people cut across the track. So what they do is put a whole pile of vegetation in the space there, which actually covers the track, but then it actually promotes recycling and biodiversity. We come to the climbing area. Once again, we're trying to channel the impact. There's bollards there that have been specifically engineered for climbers to tie their ropes onto. Once again, you can see a high erosion area. There's no vegetation. There's been some concreting. There will be an increase of runoff, which will increase erosion. Here in the descent gully, once again, no human intervention has actually happened, no management strategies. It channels impact, once again a high erosion area, but we're sacrificing land so other areas can flourish. Here's some recycling of natural material, allowing dead wood to actually sit in the natural environment rather than actually harvesting it for fires or getting rid of it, which provides food for animals, habitats, and provides nutrient-rich soil to allow other plants to grow. Here we have some olive trees that once again compete with native plants for sun, nutrients, water, and they provide very little for the native animals and decrease biodiversity within the area. Here we are at the lower section of the climbing area, and once again a high impact area zoned for climbing. There's very little to no vegetation. The area is severely compacted. We have, unfortunately, got some introduced species down here as well. The native cherry tree, which is a parasitic plant which gains all of its nutrients from a host plant. And here are some blackberries, another highly invasive weed species. Looking at the climbing face, no vegetation, there's no lichens, there's no moss due to constant climbing. You can see the chalk, which is a perceptual impact, which distracts away from the natural feeling of the area. It was pleasing to see there was no pollution where climbing takes place. There's evidence of human impact, and certain management strategies have been put in place to minimise these impacts. Has enough been done?